Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Whenever we read a Torah portion, we sometimes look for an anomaly, something that makes this Torah portion unique. The anomaly in this week's Torah portion, entitled Tetzaveh, is that since Moses entered the scene, the beginning of the book of Exodus, this is the only section of the Torah in which Moses' name is not mentioned, which is unusual. And there are two reasons given for that. One reason is that this portion usually coincides with Moses' passing. Moses passed away on the 7th day of the month of Adar, and the Torah portion is usually read in the week following the day in which Moses departed from this world. So his absence is reflected in the fact that his name was taken out of the Torah portion. A second reason given is that when Moses returned with the tablets and he witnessed the people worshiping the golden calf, and he shattered the tablets, Moses pleaded with God to spare the people. And he says to God, if you don't spare them, erase me from your book. That's going to be read next week in the next week's Torah portion. Erase me from your book. In other words, if you get rid of the people and you want to start a new nation from me, I'm not interested in that, he said. Erase me, get me out of your book. So even though God did forgive the people, but the Talmud says whenever a righteous person offers something, and even if it's based on a condition, and the condition was not met, or it was met, depending on the situation, God grants the tzaddik, the righteous person, his wish. Moses' wish was to be erased, to save the people. So even though the people were saved, he was still erased, at least from one Torah portion, which happens to coincide with the day that he left this world. So in a certain sense, it would appear that in this week's Torah portion, Moses' presence is diminished. So the Rabbi explains, on the contrary, Moses' presence is magnified many times over. Because the Torah portion begins with the words, V'yata titzaveh, and you, referring to Moses, should command the people, and that refers to the bringing of the oil for the lighting of the menorah. But instead of saying Moses should do this, God spoke to Moses, do this, the Torah uses the term you, V'ata, and you do this and this. What's the difference between saying a person's name and just saying you? A name describes a certain characteristic of the person. A name has meaning. When you say you, you're talking about the person's essence. A person's essence transcends any quality that they have. What was Moses' greatest quality? His greatest quality was that he is the one through whom God gave the Torah. The Torah is referred to as the Torah of Moses. This is a very famous verse. Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Moses commanded the Torah for us. Even though it's God's Torah, but Moses personified Torah. There was nothing more precious to Moses than the Torah. And what did Moses do? He took the Torah as it was contained within the tablets, the holiest object that ever existed, which is still around in the ark, which is buried beneath the Temple Mount, according to Maimonides. There's nothing holier than the tablets. That personifies the very holiest aspect of Torah. And what did Moses do with it? He shattered it. Why did he shatter it? Because he felt that by doing so, that would save the people. Rashi quotes this midrash that says that when a person gets married, there's a marriage contract, And if a person is unfaithful in a marriage, it's a very serious breach. But if the marriage was annulled, then there's no breach. So by breaking the tablets, it was his way of annulling the marriage contract, and that would save the people. And what did God say to Moses for breaking the tablets? You would think God would be very upset. So Rashi quotes another midrash that says that God told Moses, "Thank you, Yasher Koach, more power to you for breaking the tablets." And in fact, the very last verse of the Torah, which is a eulogy for Moses, the last 8 verses of the Torah, God eulogizes Moses. And what is the last verse, which is the climax of this? For the things that Moses did in presence of all of Israel. And Rashi says, what was this great feat of Moses? You'd think the greatest feat of Moses, he took the Jews out of Egypt, he produced the manna from heaven, he gave them the Torah. No, the greatest feat that Moses achieved was to shatter the tablets. There was nothing greater than that, because that demonstrated that the people, the Jewish people, were so special that in order to save them, he was willing to erase himself from the Torah, to separate, detach himself from that which is the most precious thing to him. And that's Moses' essence. That's why the Parsha, the section in which Moses' name is not mentioned, it's not because Moses is being punished in some way or some other reason why Moses loses his being identified by his name, but on the contrary, it's trying to tell us what is Moses' essence. Moses' essence is to be erased from the Torah to save the Jewish people, and that's his greatest praise. There's a midrash that says that there were certain things that preceded the creation of the world, and the two things are Torah and Israel. Which comes first? Israel. Israel the people. Is Israel the land? It's also special. We should focus on that these days more than we usually do anyhow because of what's going on. But that's a separate subject. I don't want to mix the two. But the Israel the people and Torah are the highest ideals in God's hierarchy of values. And the Midrash then asks rhetorically, which comes first, Torah or Israel? And the answer is Israel. That means that what Moses did for the Jewish people was to demonstrate his essence of his connection to the people. On a totally different note, this parsha is about the priestly garments. The most incredible garment that the priest, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, wore was the choshen, the breastplate. The breastplate had 12 jewels on it, and the names of all the 12 tribes were inscribed on these jewels. And he would wear them when he was in the temple. He would wear this breastplate. And whenever a crucial question that affected the Jewish nation as a whole arose, they would consult God by addressing the breastplate, and the answer would illuminate, was the first computer, actually. The answer would illuminate, if, let's say, they had a question, should they go to war or not go to war? The answer to go to war would illuminate those letters that form the words war, or go to war would illuminate. So the Talmud tells the following story. One of the 12 gems was the jasper stone, and it had the name of Benjamin on the jewel, on that stone. And one time it happened that stone disappeared. How a gem could disappear with a Kohen Gadol? The Kohen Gadol did not play tennis or golf or anything that you can say he lost it. He was in the temple all day. So how would he lose that gem? That's a mystery. But anyhow, it got lost. They couldn't find it. So they had to replace it. And it was quite a large gem. They discovered that there was a Roman official who lived in the city of Ashkelon, which is the south of Israel, not too far from Gaza, and that there was a Roman official by the name of Dama ben Netina, that he had such a jewel. They were prepared to pay big money for it. Money was no object. And they came to him and they said, we heard that you have this gem. we'd like to buy it. I don't remember the sum. They said, let's say they said 100,000 shkolim. And he said, I'm sorry, I can't sell it to you now because the key to the box in which we keep it is under my father's legs. He's sleeping right now, and I can't wake him up. So they thought he wanted more money, so they doubled the amount. So we'll give you 200,000. And I'm saying, I'm sorry, I can't give it to you. I would gladly sell it to you, but I can't because I can't wake my father up. So they tripled it and quadrupled it. And he still said no. So they realized he probably doesn't want to sell it. And they left. And then his father did awaken. So he ran after them. He caught up with them and he said, I'll sell it to you. So they were willing to give him the 400,000, the last sum that they offered. And he said, no, I want only 100,000. I'm not going to benefit from the honor of my father. The reason why I didn't sell it to you and you raised the price was because I was honoring my father. I'm not going to get paid for that. I'm only going to take the amount that you offered initially. And to reward him, next year, a red cow was born on his farm. And they needed one in Jerusalem because the red heifer was used in a purification rite for people who came in contact with the dead and they couldn't go into the temple and so on and so forth. And it's very rare to find such a red cow, completely red. And they were willing to pay him. And they paid him the amount of money that he could have made had he not given his honor to his father. And the Talmud says, from this we have to learn how to honor a parent. Talmud tells other stories of him that he was in the Senate in Rome, and his mother was there, and his mother started spitting in his face, and his mother was deranged, and he wouldn't say a single word to her. So there are a lot of questions in this story. Number one, how does a gem from the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol, how does it get lost and they can't find it? It's a little strange that happened. And number two, why does the Talmud go out of its way to tell you a story about a Roman official? The Talmud was not very fond of Rome. The Talmud was written and records things that happened shortly after the Romans destroyed the temple and massacred between 1 million and 2 million Jews. They weren't exactly people that the Talmud had great reverence for, and yet the Talmud goes out of its way to tell you a story about a Roman official, how he honored his father. For the simple understanding is that even a Roman official had honor to his father. You can imagine how important it is for us who are much better than Roman officials that we should do the same. But then there's a need for a little bit of a deeper explanation. Benjamin, of all the tribes, was the only one who was totally innocent. The 10 tribes that sold Joseph were obviously not innocent, and Joseph was not totally innocent, even though he was the victim, because he provoked them. The only one who was out of the whole fray, he was not involved in anything, was Benjamin. He didn't support the sale of his brother, and he didn't cause the sale of his brother. So what Benjamin represents is the perfect, harmonious relationship that we have for one another. And the whole idea of having all the 12 gems in the breastplate was for the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, to represent the unity of all the Jewish people. Even though we're 12 tribes, we have differences. Those differences are legitimate, provided they're all together in one breastplate, with Benjamin sealing that breastplate, the very last gem. When that gem disappeared, that was an omen from God. Because what happened in Israel before the destruction of the Second Temple, which is when this story happened, not too much before the destruction, what was going on with the Jewish community? The Talmud says the Jewish community was steeped in Torah, but they didn't get along with one another. There was what the Talmud refers to as sinat chinam, senseless hatred. And the Talmud has different stories that I won't go into of how senseless hatred caused so much sorrow and anguish for the Jewish people. And God, before the destruction of the temple, was trying to send them a signal Benjamin's gem had disappeared. Take that as a sign. Take that as a signal that there's something missing, that the holiest place in the world, the temple, where the holiest person, the Kohen Gadol, has this holy breastplate, and the gem is missing miraculously. It just disappeared into thin air. And which one was it? It was Benjamin, the one who symbolizes unity and getting along. And when the Jewish people don't get along, that's a sign that we don't respect our Father in heaven. Because what is the greatest love or the greatest wish of a parent, father or mother? The greatest wish is that the children get along. That they get along and there's love between them. Hine matov manayim, everyone knows the song. Hine matov manayim, how goodly and how pleasant it is. Shevet achim gam yachad, when brothers dwell together. I mean, the Torah, throughout the Torah, brothers don't get along. Cain and Abel didn't exactly get along. Noah's sons didn't get along. Abraham's sons didn't get along. Isaac's sons didn't get along. Jacob's sons didn't get along. The only two brothers that we read about that got along, who are the two brothers?
We
don't.
The son and the bride.
It could be, but it doesn't say anything about them getting along. No, who are the only ones who really got along and were not jealous of one another, and rejoiced when the other one was given a special privilege? Moses and Aaron. Moses is the younger brother, and God chose him, and he thought Aaron's going to feel very upset. No, not only was Aaron not upset, but God testified, "V'samach b'libo," he will rejoice in his heart. He'll be thrilled that you were chosen. There was not a scintilla of envy, of enmity, of any type of jealousy. Zero. On the contrary, he was thrilled. And what was the reward that Aaron got because of that? That he would wear the breastplate. That was his reward over his heart. That was the sign that Aaron represented the brothers getting along, the love that brothers have for one another in the most ideal way, in the most perfect way. And God was therefore sending a signal. You know what? You're not getting along. You're hurting me. You're not just hurting one another. The Father is in pain. God is our Father. He's in pain when we don't get along. So what does God do? God says, I'm going to send you a signal. I'm going to show you that a Roman official, the ones who are now threatening to annihilate you, the Romans were already in control of Israel at that time. That's why this Roman official lived in Ashkelon. He wasn't living in Rome. He was living in Israel because Romans were taking over. And he's going to teach you a lesson in honoring a father and a mother. You're going to get the lesson from your enemy as a sign that you have to recognize that you have to get along with one another. Yes, 12 tribes, 12 gems. Each one is a different kind of a gem. You will each have different qualities that you contribute, without which you would be incomplete, but you have to be part of one breastplate. And then God sends this signal, and apparently the people didn't recognize that it wasn't just, a simple thing of getting a lost gem from a Roman official, but it was there to teach you a lesson of how important it is for God for when we get along. What was the reward that this official got? He got a red cow. Okay, it was worth a lot of money, but what was the symbolism of that red cow? What was the red cow for? It's to purify someone. Now the Talmud says that the one who was involved in preparing the red cow, which they slaughtered and they burnt it, and the ashes were mixed with water and was sprinkled on the person. The person who got the water sprinkled on him or her would become purified. The people who were involved in making this mixture became contaminated. That sounds like a contradiction. The one who is being sprinkled upon gets purified, and the one who does the preparation for it gets contaminated. But there's a very powerful message over there, that sometimes we have to go out of our way to help someone else, even at the expense of our own well-being, a spiritual or physical well-being, which is the message that the Rabbi had inculcated in his followers for decades, the importance of reaching out to every Jew, wherever wherever the Jew lived, not just geographically, but whatever level they were on, even if it meant that you had to compromise your own level of religiosity. You were not in the center of religious and Jewish involvement. That's the lesson that God wanted the Jewish people to recognize. Stop focusing on yourself. Think about what you can do to help others, even at your own expense. As I mentioned in other classes, we're living at a time in history when this idea of unity is called for more than any other time I can think of. And thank God that in spite of the terrible events of October 7th, the horrific events, by and large, the Jewish people are more united now than they were in decades. Since the Six-Day War, I don't think there has been a time when the Jewish people are so united, although the Satan has his ways of creating disharmony even in a time when unity is so important, when politics starts to encroach. But I hope and pray that it's not going to change and this unity will get stronger and stronger, because that's the only way we show God that we care for one another, and God says, then I care for you. You're giving me nachas. What's the greatest blessing you can give a parent? You should have nachas from your children. What does the word nachas mean? You can't translate it. It's a Hebrew Yiddish word that has no one word translation in English. Nachas can be translated as pleasure. That's the blessing that a parent should have pleasure from your kids. No, it doesn't. Satisfaction. The English is a poor language. You can't fully translate the word nachas. It's whatever you think it means and much more. That's what you want from your children. And that's what God wants from us. He wants nachas from us. And how do we give him nachas? Obviously, every time we do a mitzvah, every time we put on tefillin, every time we light Shabbos candles, we keep kosher every Shabbos, and I'm not going to go through all 613 mitzvahs. But whatever mitzvah you do, you give God nachas. But the greatest nachas he gets when the family is together and united. And we have to work on that. That's the most challenging of all mitzvahs, because Jews are very, very good at arguing in a good way, and sometimes we let it get to a level where it's not so good. So we're not telling people to stop arguing. Anyone could stop arguing and be united. It's to argue and still be united, still have this love for one another. Any questions?
Rabbi, to say that this is the only portion that does not supposedly have
Moses' name in it. In Deuteronomy, in Genesis his name is not mentioned because he wasn't born yet. In Deuteronomy, Moses is the narrator, so he's not going to mention his own name. But every other place, his name is mentioned in every parsha, usually more than once, and here it's not even once.
So then you read it.
And by the way, not so much by the way, it's a main point. The word for breastplate in Hebrew is choshen. Choshen numerically adds up to 358. And 358 is the same numerical value as Mashiach. So this is a very powerful lesson for us bringing Mashiach, that we have to be wearing. Every one of us is a high priest, spiritually speaking. Physically, only you have to be a Kohen. You have to be a descendant of Aaron. And you're only one of all the Kohanim, only one high priest in a generation. But spiritually speaking, Maimonides writes, we're all members of the tribe of Levi. We're all priests and high priests. And we have to wear that breastplate, figuratively, spiritually, that breastplate on our heart to get pleasure from seeing the good news that we hear about another Jew. In Yiddish, there's a word, again, it's a word in Yiddish that there's no word even in Hebrew for it. They made up a word. It's called fargin. If I say, I forgin you, That means, again, I can't translate it into English. I don't begrudge. In English, you can only do it in a negative way. I don't begrudge you this good news. But not only to not begrudge, but to be happy when you hear that someone had some good news happening to them. It didn't happen to you. Someone won the lottery, but you didn't win it. What do most people think? If only I won the lottery. But no, feel good that someone won the lottery. Someone who maybe needed it, and someone who you know, especially, even though you didn't win it. One of the reasons, of course, because you didn't buy the ticket. But to forgin is to really feel good about the other person's gain, even if it is your loss. And that's what brings Mashiach.
May I ask you a question? When you were talking, I was thinking about the sin of Gan Eden and the eating of the fruit that bestowed the knowledge of good and evil. That it was supposedly in accordance with like what God had wanted, the tree of life. That the tree of life was supposed to come first, but the tree of good and evil was taken out first, and that created sin. And I was wondering what the relationship was with the breaking of the tablets and the second giving of the tablets and that.
I mean, the connection is, there always seems to be a breaking point before there's a rectification. God designed the world where he wants things to break, because that once they're repaired, they're much stronger than they were before. So that happened with his sin of the tree of knowledge. According to the Midrash, God orchestrated it in such a way that even though they still had free choice, because they're humans, they were given free choice, the choice was almost impossible to make. I mean, you take a person who, and they put them in a situation where they find a wallet with thousands of dollars, and they know for sure that nobody saw, and they need it. They don't have money to pay their rent for that month, and they're short on food supplies for their children. They still have free choice not to keep the money, and also the money, the wallet was dropped. You could tell by the wallet it was a very wealthy person. So you have so many arguments favoring you taking the money. So what are the odds that you're not going to take it? Very small. You still have the free choice, but the likelihood is you're going to say. Same thing with Adam and Eve. God put the temptation in front of them in such an intense way that the odds were 1 in 1,000 that they would resist. Why did God put them into such a position? Because he wanted them to fall. Because then when you repair things after falling, they're much stronger. And the same thing with the broken tablets. The broken tablets was, again, another thing where the tablets, the holiest thing, were broken, but it led to the repairing the second tablets, which in a way was stronger than the first tablets. First tablets were holier, but the second tablets were stronger. And the same thing is true with every time things break. Maybe that's another reason why when someone at a meal breaks a dish, everyone cries out Mazel Tov. Why are they crying out Mazel Tov? Because at a wedding, when they deliberately break a glass, and everyone says Mazel Tov because of the wedding, but there's no wedding, so why is everyone saying Mazel Tov? Because I think they're trying to say that when something breaks, there's a potential for this to come back much stronger than before. Any other questions?
Inexperienced, maybe a human being on the stand, and look, to break the stable, it's always going to be weaker. Always. And the belly.
Yes, that's true. But the table might be weaker, but what comes afterwards could be stronger.
Yes, I. Physically, well, but
There's a Hasidic tradition that if someone, God forbid, has a fire in their house and they lose a lot of property, they will become rich. Because the way God's attributes work, the first thing is chesed. Chesed is kindness. The next thing is gevura, judgment, harshness. The next one is rachamim, compassion, which is stronger than kindness. So after first God gives you something, it's chesed, then he takes it away, fire, consumes it. The next step is there's going to be compassion, which God compensates and gives you more than you had before.
Where is the, if I'm remembering correctly, Moshe was not allowed to enter the land of Israel, and it was tied to this action, right? Wasn't he?
No, not this.
It was the hitting of the
It was this, right.
Okay.
Right. And actually, that was also another orchestrated thing. God didn't want Moses to enter the land because his nation, his people that he shepherded for 40 years, all died in the desert. A leader doesn't leave his flock. And the Midrash says that when Mashiach comes, and it'll be the resurrection of the dead, Moses will all lead them to Israel. As a leader, he never... It reminds me, Sharon, General Sharon, once asked the Rebbe, he had a very close relationship with the Rebbe, and he once asked the Rebbe, why don't you come to Israel? He says, in Israel, unlike other countries, the officers go ahead of the troops. That's why you're seeing the casualties. You're seeing a lot of high-ranking officers are killed. So you, as a leader, should lead the Jews into Israel. So the Rebbe responded, he said, your military training, your connection to the military is the army, because I was connected to the Navy. The Rebbe was an electrical engineer for the U.S. Navy during World War II, and helped, the electrical system of the ships that were engaged in battle. He says in the Navy, the captain is the last one to leave a sinking ship. So the Rebbe was saying, I'm not going to leave my flock until everyone is taken care of.
Sure as that's up. Steven.
Oh, okay.
Your dog speaking.
When you look around the world today and you see the anti-Semitism coming from every direction, right, left, and center, you can count the friends that we have on our fingers. It's the whole world, and accusing Israel of the most heinous crimes and taking everything that's being done to us and thrown as if we're doing it to everyone. It's really can get you very demoralized. But when you know that this was all predicted, the prophets refer to how all the nations will gang up against the Jews, in Israel in particular, and it revolves around Jerusalem. If you really get to the bottom of it, and you say, well, Hamas and the supporters of Hamas, because it's not just Hamas, it's all the organizations there share the same desire. If you say we're going to give you everything except Jerusalem, either that or you can have Jerusalem and nothing else. I guarantee you they'll take Jerusalem and nothing. Of course, they want everything, but if they give them a hypothetical choice, they're going to say you can keep everything as long as we have Jerusalem. So this is the biblical reference to how the nations will gang up against the Jews and demand Jerusalem. Israel, and of course, as well, but primarily Jerusalem. So we know that this has been predicted, and we know that they're not going to succeed. It's guaranteed. If you look at the second Psalm, the book of Psalms, the second Psalm is about why are the nations raging with all their anger against the Jewish people, and what is going to happen to them. I mean, the Tanakh is replete with the reference to this. So how do we respond? Unfortunately, Israel does not have a very good PR system. They're very deficient, but it's not. I can't just blame it on the lack of good PR. But the world is not interested in truth. PR is only good if you're interested in truth and you're interested in accepting what the truth is. But if you're just interested in hearing negative things about Jews and about Israel, PR is not the answer. But the only answer is that we have to be true to ourselves. Of course, you should engage in PR. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do whatever you can do, even if it's only minimally effective. But the most important thing is that we have to be true to ourselves. To be true to ourselves as recognize that we are Jews and be faithful to Judaism and not make excuses and not water down our commitment to Israel. I heard someone say, stop explaining what Israel is doing here, doing there. When you talk about Israel, it's our land and that's it. And besides the fact that it's true to ourselves, it takes away from what the Arabs are thinking about us. I remember, I think it was Meir Kahane who said this. If you're in a debate with, I think he said this about Abi Ibn, who was in a debate with some Palestinian. And he said the Palestinian was claiming Israel is ours, Jerusalem is ours. And Abi Ibn was saying, oh, we could negotiate, we could. Obviously, if you don't claim it's all yours, then why should you get any of it? That person says it's all his. And if you're a thief, could you negotiate and say, look, I stole your property, that's true, but I'm willing to give you half of it, return half of it. You lose the second you talk about a peace process in which you make compromises. Besides the fact that they're not interested in your compromises, they're not interested in a peace process, they want your destruction. But it doesn't even, the rest of the world looks at us and says, you're talking about real estate, they're talking about their faith, they're talking about something that they believe is God-given. And you're talking about, something that you could compromise on, you can negotiate, you can wheel and deal. And we can't wheel and deal. It's not up for any type of negotiation. And if we said that, the world would recognize that there's no way that they can force us to compromise because we're not talking about real estate. In a real estate deal, you can compromise. When it comes to financial matters, you can compromise. In the Talmud, there seems to be a discrepancy. In one place, it says that compromising in a court case is the ideal. And that's the way rabbinical courts today, mostly when they have two sides arguing about some financial matters, the courts will try to get the two parties to compromise. On the other hand, the Talmud criticizes Judah, for compromising. When they wanted to kill Joseph, he says, what are we going to gain if we kill him? Let's just sell him. And the Talmud is very harsh in criticizing Yehuda for making that compromise. What's the difference? The difference is that you can compromise when it comes to money. When it comes to your own personal interests, you can compromise, and it's a good thing to compromise. But when it comes to values and principles, compromising is a dirty word. Compromising is evil.
You can't compromise truth.
You can't compromise truth. You can't compromise your life. You can't say, well, they wanted to murder 7 million Jews. Let's compromise, just 3 million. We'll keep the majority, 4 million. You're going to compromise about that? You can't. You can't compromise about the land of Israel. And also this whole thing about how many Jews are Zionists or anti-Zionists. This is not about a political philosophy. You ask 90% of Jews, what is the philosophy of Zionism? No one will tell you. Because the truth is, I don't know what it is. I really don't know what it is, the philosophy of Zionism. I can say some words about it, but I don't really fully understand it. But I do believe in the philosophy of saving Jewish lives. There are 6 to 7 million Jews living in Israel. Their lives are in jeopardy. If they wouldn't have the weapons, if America stops supporting Israel with weaponry, and Israel no longer could fight, there's no question there'd be no more Jew left in Israel. Not one Jew would survive, including the anti-Zionists in Torah Karta, and including the extreme left wing who want to compromise everything with the Arabs. They'll all be slaughtered. The only question is, in what order will they be slaughtered? That's the only question. So we can't compromise, and as long as they see we're willing to compromise, there's a wiggle room. There's going to be more and more pressure. So that's the response. We have to be strong in our Judaism, in our unity, in our uncompromising stance when it comes to the land of Israel and the status of Jerusalem and so on.